Gardens 34.4, London St James's Park 34.3, Cavendish in Suffolk 34.1, and Santon Downham in Suffolk 34 degrees Celsius. So the hottest place at midday today was Charlwood in Essex at 34.8 degrees Celsius. We'll keep across those rising temperatures for you, of course, throughout the afternoon. Stay with us here on Sky News. In a moment, I'll be joined by health expert, head teacher, and by the spokesperson for Network Rail to look at the impact of the heatwave on public services. Hello and welcome back on what is set to be one of the hottest days ever recorded in the UK. A red extreme warning in place across the country for the first time ever, with much of it likely to be hotter than the Caribbean and even the Western Sahara, or with temperatures set to break records. Let's take a look at some other notable heat waves in British history. Back in 1976, the UK faced what was at the time the driest year for more than a century as drought plagued the country. As temperatures soared, there were two six-day periods when the temperature reached 32.2 degrees every day, the first time this has been recorded in the UK. The peak temperature that summer was felt in Cheltenham when 35.9 degrees was recorded on the 3rd of July. Then came 1995, which at the time saw the hottest August on record since 1659. Temperatures peaked at 35.2 degrees. And it's now recognised as one of the hottest summers in the UK's history. Sky's Shingi Marike joins me now live from Reading, still next to that beautiful-looking pool. Tempting, isn't it? Shingi, how are people managing there?
It's awfully tempting, and in the last hour I've actually been handed these swimming trunks. I won't be wearing them, I'm working, but someone felt pretty bad for me and gave me a pair of those. We've been here all morning and we've been monitoring the temperature as it's steadily increased. The mercury is rising, and we're about 37 degrees poolside now, which gives you a sense as to how warm it is if you have a look at our thermometer here. And I think it's been interesting talking to people next to the pool about their approaches to this weather. Lots of people changing the rhythms and routines of their daily life because of this heat wave. It was a lot fuller early on in the day before it got to about 11 o'clock and people started leaving, which is in line with the UK Health Security Agency's assessment that people need to stay out of the sunshine and in the shade when it gets to this peak time of the day, if you like, and when it really reaches boiling point. It's also been interesting having conversations with people here about the broader issues behind this, and more than once we've heard climate change come up. People in the pool have said that this is proof that the government needs to act, that this needs to be looked at, because 40-degree heat in the UK is obviously up to this point unheard of, and the overall sense is that people have adapted their routines to staying at home because of those weather warnings put in place by the Met Office. People who are due to travel to London decided not to go because they saw those warnings by the rail networks about the mass disruption. Some people are even working from home, or I guess working poolside in their swim gear as they sort of enjoy the day from here. But it's quite clear this is the sort of weather that is forcing people to change their daily routines and bringing lots of the country's infrastructure to a standstill.
Shingi, let's see those trunks again.
I thought you might ask me why not. So I'm not a crab man, but we've got some crab action going on here. As I say, you will not be seeing me wear them.
No, we want you live in the pool next hour. Thank you very much for now. Let's head to Cambridge, join Sky's Laura Bundock. She's in the beautiful Botanic Garden in Cambridge. And Laura, the current record, I believe, was set where you are.
Yeah, this is officially the place that holds the record for the hottest place ever recorded in the UK, when it hit 38.7 degrees back on the 25th of July 2019. At 10 o'clock this morning, they took the temperature here and it was 31.5 degrees. It's definitely hotter than that now, but I'm afraid we're not going to know until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning whether or not the record has been broken. That's purely because the weather recording box can only get opened at the same time every day. Otherwise, the science simply doesn't work. But the important thing is here at the Botanic Garden is that every measurement that is taken is fed back to the Met Office. And that's something, you know, this isn't a record that the Botanic Garden is proud to hold. This is something that they are angry about, they're upset about, and they say is very much an indication of climate change. And here, there are 40 acres where they've got plants from all different bits of the United Kingdom, including dry gardens, Mediterranean gardens, which need less watering, and they're very much keen to support the work of those climate scientists to try and figure out what is going on and the impact it's having, not just on the flora and fauna, but on all of our lives as well. So important scientific work here. But yeah, this is officially the place that holds the record for the hottest place ever. And there aren't actually that many people here today. As you can understand, it is really hot. It's that kind of hairdryer feeling when you step out of air conditioning. So few people in the gardens today, most people keeping in the shade, keeping cool, keeping up the fluids and things. But we're waiting to see if temperatures are really going to get higher. And as I say, you know, we're only at midday at the moment and things are kind of starting to get hotter and hotter. We wouldn't even expect those hot temperatures and for another couple of hours anyway. But we'll keep you posted here in Cambridge.
OK, Laura, thank you very much. Well, across the UK, public services are bracing to be impacted by the high temperatures. Ambulance capacity has increased. Trains have been cancelled. Some schools have even announced that they're going to close early. Well, joining me now to answer your questions are Miriam Deakin, the Interim Deputy Chief Executive of NHS Providers, Head Teacher of Wales High School in Rotherham, Pepe Diasio, and the Chief Spokesperson for Network Rail, Kevin Groves. Good to see you all. Thanks for joining us, trying to keep cool this afternoon. Perhaps we can come to you first of all, Miriam. Just explain to us what the pressure points are today.
Thank you. Well, we know that this extreme heat can be very difficult for people with underlying health conditions, older people and children. And so the NHS is planning for and is seeing increased demand for urgent and emergency care services. To make room for that, we are seeing some disruption in some areas of the country to planned care to ensure that we don't have people waiting in incredibly hot ambulances at the hospital front door, and that we've got space within hospitals to see them and treat them. The weather conditions are also putting real pressure on the NHS estate, much of which is in need of much greater investment and is quite hard to manage even in normal weather conditions. So, for example, we're hearing of operating theatres having to be put on pause while the temperature within them is got under control. We know that medicines have to be managed very carefully at a particular temperature, and we're also hearing that IT servers are being put under pressure. So, real pressure on that kind of key NHS infrastructure. Of course, staff are under real pressure because this all comes on the back of an increase in COVID infections, and of course our endeavours to bear down on those care backlogs which have built up since the pandemic. So very difficult working conditions for staff also, and trust leaders are doing all they can to pull out all the stops to keep both staff and patients as cool and as comfortable as possible. So we know that many staff are wearing slightly different uniforms today. Some of them are wearing their scrubs instead of a fuller uniform. Trusts have bought up thousands of bottles of water, extra fans. We've heard of hospital kitchens making ice lollies to help keep staff and patients cool. So we're doing all that we can to keep people as safe and as comfortable as possible in these very challenging conditions.
Kevin, let's speak to you. When it comes to Network Rail, we're hearing about potential cancellations and delays as well. What's the very latest?
Well, it's still a bit early for that yet. While it's hot, it's not really hot. And the blanket speed restrictions we've put into place across the country, across England and Wales, have only just been in for about half an hour. So the effects of an impact of that heat haven't yet been felt on the railway, but people shouldn't be lulled into a false sense of security that it's going to remain that way. For instance, this morning it may have taken 2.5 hours to get from London to Leeds. If you made that journey now, it's more like 5 hours. So please, our message is, if you don't need to travel today and tomorrow by rail, then please don't. And we've seen a lot of people trying to escape to the seaside using train services this morning. And I hate to be a killjoy, but please, that is not a journey that is necessary or essential, because there's a chance we may not be able to get you home if things deteriorate badly this evening and this afternoon. So please, only travel if it's absolutely necessary. Make sure you're well hydrated and got some water with you. And remember that the line out of King's Cross up to Leeds and York is going to be closed tomorrow. So that journey to Leeds, while you can make it today, you won't be able to make it tomorrow.
OK, thank you for that. And Pepe, what are you doing to make school a bit more comfortable for everybody?
So the first thing we did this morning was make sure that students arrived out of normal school uniform. The vast majority of our school are here in shorts, T-shirts and hats to make sure they can keep their heads cool throughout the day. We're now awaiting lunchtime, which will be the real hotspot for us. It's 32 degrees here at the moment, and the temperature's due to go up a degree for every hour throughout the afternoon. We have had some great news that we have a couple of ice cream vans that have been ordered, and they will be joining us here on site, and I'm sure they'll be very popular with the young people. And we're using this opportunity to do some extra learning on climate change and making sure that our students are well prepared for looking after themselves into the future on days like this that may be more common as we look forward to the new era that we're heading into.
Oh, very clever. Yeah, a good bit of useful learning today. OK, let's have a look at some of the questions we've had in then. Miriam, perhaps you can answer this one from Sean. Staying well and not needing the NHS is key today. And he asks, is it safe for people working outdoors, for instance, on building sites, wearing PPE?
Good question. Thank you, Sean. Key messages, I think, are that the NHS is there for those of us who need urgent emergency care. That's very important to say. But equally, very important, I think, for employers to work with their staff to make the necessary adjustments so that we can all follow the NHS guidance to stay out of the heat and stay out of the sun between 11 and 3. Keep well hydrated, as we've heard, and seek out the shade. So certainly it was good to see in your package earlier that a lot of the general public are adhering to those messages. And I do think it's important that employers do make some of the adjustments we've just heard about from the previous spokesperson, for example, and do work with their staff to keep staff as safe in this extreme heat as possible.
Yeah, so much of this is down to common sense, really, isn't it? Kevin, a question from Amanda. If tarmac melts and train tracks buckle, how will the repairs be done?
Well, the answer to that is overnight. We have to wait for the rails to cool down as much as possible and then basically get welders in to chop out the bits of rail that have buckled, put in a new piece and weld it back together again. Needless to say, that isn't a thing that can be done in just a few minutes. That's a few hours job. But the reason we put the speed restrictions in place is to lessen the forces in the track when it gets really hot. Fast trains exert a lot more forces in the rail and can force it to buckle. So the idea is that actually by slowing trains down, we're less likely to see those buckles, which is what we're aiming to do, because needless to say, a train travelling quickly over a buckled rail is not a good place to be, and we don't want to see that.
And Kevin, this might be a slightly too technical question, but why is it in countries where they regularly get temperatures in the late 30s, 40s, the trains run without any problems, and yet here, the minute it hits the high 30s, the tracks start buckling? Are they using different types of track?
No, the simple answer to that is any railway in the world is set up to handle about a 45-degree temperature range. So if I was in Saudi Arabia and a rail engineer, I'd set it up for, say, be 10 degrees up to 55 degrees centigrade. That's because I'm not going to have -5 in the winter, but we do in this country. So for our railway, we set it up for about to handle temperatures around -10 up to 35. And above or below those temperatures, we need to take mitigation actions like putting the blanket speed restrictions. Of course, if we're more likely to see more severe summers and less severe winters, then we might change our engineering standards and move that temperature range up the scale. So say -5 to +40 in that range. But those decisions are big, long-term decisions that'll take many years to go through our engineering standards. So the answer is, it's the same for railways across the entire world. They set up their railways and engineer their railways for their normal climate. But when there are peaks, either at the bottom end or the top end, they have to take these actions as well. The railways in the south of France and Spain have been just as impacted this past week as they have seen temperatures exceed their normal operating parameters for their railway.
OK, very interesting. Pepe, one for you from Carol. Due to the increase in temperatures in the future, will schools and nursing homes be encouraged to obtain air conditioning? You have some air conditioning, I think, in your school. Do you think as we build schools going forward, it'll be a requirement?
Well, we were lucky enough last week to be named in the government's latest cohort of schools that will have a rebuild in the next 2 years. And I'm fairly confident that many of the new classrooms that we'll get here will be air conditioned and built to standards that are far in excess of the buildings that we're in now, which are 1970s concrete buildings that are cold in the winter and too hot in the summer. And we are very lucky to have, as I say, dozens of classrooms that have got air conditioning. On a day like today, most of our students will be spending the lunch hour in those air-conditioned rooms, making sure that we keep them cool and keep them safe. And we've just changed our duty rota to allow for that to happen.
And Pepe, just staying with you, Noah Robson has been in touch as well. He says, who decides whether a school should remain open and at what temperature is there a legal requirement for them to close, if indeed there is?
I think that's the obligation of the head teacher, that they're able to make assessment on the ground in the context that they are given. From one part of the country to another, there could be quite significant changes in the temperature. It's something that I'm looking at every hour here today. We're looking at a temperature that goes up towards 40 degrees here tomorrow. And we've got to make sure that it's safe for young people. And as a head teacher, that's your first priority. So it's the head teacher on the ground that will make that decision.
And Miriam, how do we prepare for the future? If we're going to get more days like this, if we're going to get extended periods of really hot weather, what does the NHS need to do to adapt?
I think events like this really show that capacity in the NHS hasn't kept pace with changing population need and how the world's evolved. So we really need to work with government, I think, to look at NHS funding, make sure we've got enough capacity across all of our services. So certainly in the ambulance sector and the acute hospital sector, which you've talked about, but also across community and mental health services. And today really does point to a pressing need to look at the NHS estate and really to release as much capital as possible to modernise some of the buildings that we're dealing with and trying to provide care within. A lot of those buildings are quite difficult to manage in normal UK temperatures, and days like today just really show the acute need to invest in them more and bring them up to modern day standards.
OK, Miriam Deakin from NHS Providers, Kevin Groves from Network Rail and Pepe Diazio, head teacher of Wales High School in Rotherham. Great to get your thoughts and comments and answering some of those questions. Much appreciated. Stay cool and thank you very much. You're with Sky News today. Coming up after the break, the extreme heat has brought raging fires to southern and western Europe. We're going to have the very latest from southern France.
And it was 1989 in Australia, and some guy was trying to take me out for a meal, and he was carrying on for a few months to get me out. Anyway, in the end, I said, OK, let's go out for a meal, and no funny business. And when we were there, we got to the restaurant and I went to use the bathroom and I forgot my bag. And when I came back, his hand was hovering and he moved it really quickly. And I thought, he's done something to my drink. So I picked up my bag, I went into the bathroom and I thought, I'm going to do like a James Bond style and swap the drinks when I go back. But I didn't. I climbed out of a little window and ran for my life. And I never saw that guy again. So
lucky escape.
Even back in 1989, I knew that this was happening. Now, thank goodness for all the brave victims who stepped forward, and thank goodness for social media, because I've been campaigning for nearly 2 decades now, banging on the doors of the authorities to say to them, look, this is a real problem. But because of the drugs and because people have no memory what's happened to them, it does make the police's job really difficult. And with students, it's very prevalent. They could use Rohypnol, GHB, GBL. They could use prescription drugs like the Temazepam family.
Right, so things that will just knock you out entirely.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And they'll leave you with no memory of what's happened to you. You'll become compliant, you'll leave with the assailant, and then, like I say, you'll be left with no memory of what's happened to you.
The inspiration behind our product came from understanding how big of a problem livestock methane emissions were.
Navigate your way to the right outcome. Invest in your future. Sky News Financial Reports, sponsored by Interactive Investor. Invest in your future. Sky News Financial Reports, sponsored by Interactive Investor.
Now, in southern and western Europe, authorities have been battling to control huge wildfires in countries including Spain, Greece and France. Temperatures are extremely high across the continent, and Spain is expected to experience 42 degrees Celsius today. And as temperatures drop in the UK on Wednesday, they will still stay high in southern Europe. Well, this footage was filmed this morning in northern Spain. It shows moments of panic on a train travelling from the capital, Madrid, to the city of Ferrol. The train stopped because of wildfires. And passengers were able to see the flames on both sides from the train windows. Pretty terrifying, that, isn't it? It was able to continue on its journey. After a few minutes, everyone was safe. Sky's Siobhan Robbins has the latest now from Bordeaux in the west of France.
I'm here in the command centre in Bordeaux, where they're working together to try and tackle these massive fires that have broken out in southwest France. So you can see that we've got here representatives of the army, there are police there as well, fire brigade too, and what they're doing.
Just had a dream.
Area, as well as getting locals out. And we can have a look at a map here to show you where the fires are that they're tackling. So we've got one here which is by the coast, 5 campsites evacuated here, more than 4,000 hectares of land already burned. And then here is the other massive one that they've been trying to bring under control, more than 9,000 hectares of land burnt there. In total, 16,000 people have been evacuated from their homes here. More than 1,700 firefighters now on the scenes trying to bring both of those blazes under control. The problem they had is today was really the deadline. This was where they were trying to get them under control by, because the heat is so strong here. It's going to be at least 40 degrees in this area. Some weather forecasters are calling this an apocalypse of heat because so many areas of France are affected. By lunchtime, they're expecting every single city in this country to be at least 30 degrees. And of course, it's not just the fires that are putting lives at risk, it's also the heat. Across Europe, so in France and Spain and Portugal, we've been seeing all of these fires over the last week. We know in Spain and Portugal, more than 1,000 people have died of heat. And because these fires haven't been able to be brought under control at the weekend, now they're really, really battling it. The issue they had over the weekend was the wind was whipping around 360 degrees. It's happening in pine forest, which is adding fuel to those fires. And really, really now, everything is being put in to try and stop this before temperatures hopefully drop again tomorrow.
Just before the weather, let me tell you about the singer Jennifer Lopez. She's married the Hollywood actor Ben Affleck in Las Vegas 3 months after confirming their engagement and 18 years after cancelling their first wedding. The couple were previously engaged back in 2002, but called off the wedding. Both went on to have families with different partners before rekindling their relationship last year and getting married in Vegas. OK, let's get the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
As we've been reporting, it's going to be hot over the next couple of days with a risk of dangerous record-breaking temperatures, but it will turn cooler by Wednesday. The Met Office has a red warning of extreme heat in force for much of central England, while amber warnings cover the rest of central and southern Britain. It's going to be hot for most this afternoon, very hot for England and Wales, but the far north will be cooler. Most places will be dry, plenty of sunshine into the evening, but the far north will be dull and damp for a time. The Hebrides will turn grey later.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.